So there I was, hunkered down in my hotel room, waiting for my application for an apartment to be approved, spending my time shopping for furniture and other necessities, when I started getting some comments critiquing one of my old videos. No, not that video. No, further back. Oh god no, further still. Yep, here we are. Believe it or not, a creationist is actually trying to defend the arguments of Dr. Mark Surtees. Who is Dr. Surtees, you ask? Some creationists are just everyday people with non-scientific education credentials, such as dentistry, philosophy, auto mechanics. Some are just nobodies who we would have never known existed if it were not for the invention of the internet and the ability for them to freely express their foolish ideas in a public venue viewable across the entire planet. However, there are a small minority of creationists who went through years of undergraduate study and then even more years of study, research, and documentation, earned legitimate scientific degrees, and supposedly had a good understanding of the basic principles of science. Despite the training and education they received, they managed to hold on to their ridiculous beliefs that fly in the face of everything they supposedly learned during their education. Now, as you might imagine, the ability to earn a scientific degree and be dishonest or deluded enough to be a young Earth creationist is a pretty rare combination. As a result, the few that exist tend to stretch their qualifications. And there are a lot of creationist shams with fake degrees who are trotted out to pad the short list. Enter Mark Surtees.
I'm a biologist.
Well, technically he's a zoologist. He's a member of the Edinburgh Creation Group, some real scientists who give speeches and post articles defending the literal 6-day recent creation of the universe. Their website hasn't been updated in several years, and I can't find anything newer about Mark Surtees than 2013. So I have no idea what he's doing these days, but he'll always hold a special place in my memory. I was still fairly new to the creationism craziness, and Surtees, with his inane and simplistic arguments,
Living on this planet for about 100,000 years, you can actually work out how many dead bodies there should be around.
The way he spoke on various topics, all while proclaiming his ignorance of the same topics in the same breath.
And as the hydrogen is used up, it actually gets hotter rather than colder. Surprisingly enough. There's no problem there. It's basically because of the physics of the sun. Don't ask me to go into it, I'm a biologist.
And the fact that he was actually a scientist made him a good subject to cut my teeth on. My debunking Surtees videos were some of my earliest, and they are where my style of editing started to take shape. They also led to me getting my very first subscriber boost when they garnered a shout out by Andromeda's Wake.
Now, the first shout out I want to give is to a criminally undersubscribed YouTube user, and his name is J.R. Chadwick. J.R. Chadwick makes videos on topics of science with a focus on debunking creationism, which, as we all know, is a very, very noble cause. His videos are absolutely great. He's recently made a couple of videos where he dismantled arguments by a guy called Mark Surtees, who I think he's a biologist. I believe he's a biologist, and he is a creationist who feels the need to talk on topics of geology and astronomy and try to sort of fudge that into his creation model. And it doesn't work, of course. But thanks to J.R. Chadwick, his arguments have been demolished on YouTube. So go and check him out, go and subscribe to him, and keep up with his videos.
The quality hasn't aged well, but I am still mostly happy with the content. But let's take a look back at Mark Surtees' arguments and see if I can find a few things to add.
Growth rates first, though. Human population growth. It's an interesting question to ask is, how long would it take for this Earth to have 6 billion people on it? We now have 6 billion people on this Earth. Would that take a long time? Would that take a short time? How long would it actually take?
Yes, Mark Surtees first. His line one, his top billing argument, was the rate of human population growth. One of the silliest and most simplistic of all creationist arguments. It comes in a lot of forms. Ken Ham has his own version where the population rate changes during certain periods of history to whatever suits his purpose. Rapid growth rate when ancient Egypt needed a workforce, slower during the Dark Ages, whatever he needs to do to try to cram tens of thousands of years of human history into 4,000 years. Mark does not even bother with that.
Present population, as I've already said, is 6 billion, and the present growth rate over recent years is about 2% per year, an increase of about 2% per year. It might actually be slowing down now, but that's a fairly slow growth rate. But if that growth rate, say, has been constant over a period of time, how long would it take if we started with 2 people to get to 6 million people? Only about 1,100 years to get from 2 people to 6 billion at a growth rate of 2%.
Okay, I think I know how he arrived at that figure. He used this equation. It's pretty simple. I am a math tutor. I do this all the time. This is the exponential growth function.
Okay, great. I did some math.
And what do we have? About 1,101.97 years.
Only about 1,100 years.
So yeah, Surtees just used a simplistic algebra equation to measure the growth rate of our population. First off, his 2% growth rate is complete bollocks, and I will let the younger, fatter me continue to explain why.
At any rate, we know the population growth rate was not 2% 2,000 years ago. We know it was not 2% 200 years ago. And it is not recently slowing down slightly. The growth rate is about 1.3%. It reached its peak in the period from 1965 to 1975, at about 2.1%. The current rate is 62% of what it was 30 years ago.
So, Surtees is either woefully naive or extremely dishonest. It has been 9 years since I made this video. I'm older and wiser, and I can expand on why this is stupid. And it is very stupid. Fractally stupid, in fact. What exactly is this equation implying? First off, since the population growth is only compounded annually, hell, that's a weird sentence. It means that the population only reproduces once per year and all at the same time. And at a 2% growth rate, it would take 21 years before the first baby would even be born. It also means that every human who was ever born would still be alive after the 1100-year period. There is a little more backstory to this. I had a long email conversation with Dr. Surtees, but the email thread is somewhere in an old Outlook PST backup file, and I don't care to search for it. He attempted to defend each of the arguments I debunked in my 2 videos. He rebuffed my previous response by claiming his demonstration was just a proof of concept, showing that it was not necessary to wait a long period of time to reach our current population. But even if we ignore the lie about the 2% constant growth rate, what the hell is the point? Even if it was not the wrong equation to measure unbounded population growth, human population growth is not unbounded. The carrying capacity of our planet has changed dramatically as the geography and atmosphere have undergone drastic changes. Most drastically, our advances in technology have created a huge leap in the amount of humans this planet can support. Our population has been as low as a few thousand hunter-gatherers roaming the wilderness, struggling day to day to find their next meal and survive the elements. The population grew to tens and eventually hundreds of thousands when the first farming and preserving techniques were developed. The less time people had to spend struggling to live, the more time they could spend making discoveries and inventions. Sometimes our population growth rate went into the negatives due to things like plagues and wars. But once we hit the 20th century and we gained some important improvements in medical care and increases in standard of living, our population exploded. There is absolutely nothing to be gained from Surtees' demonstration. Enter Mark King. That's Mark with a K this time. He's not too happy with my videos and has a lot to say about them, even to the point of picking fights with comment posters from 6 years ago. Don't worry, I am not going to read all of them, but let us look at his main contentions with me.
Okay, let's look at some of your moronic replies to Dr. Surtees' seminar.
Well, off to a great start!
Your first objection is over Dr. Surtees' use of population growth as a marker for the age of the Earth, whereas the population growth is not the strongest evidence for a young Earth. It is not stupid either. It is a legitimate mathematical model as demonstrated in an article I linked to here from Creation Research Institute.
I think he means the Institute for Creation Research, the brilliant repository of scientific publications that declares the Book of Genesis to be fully historical and perspicuous. The story that describes two human beings conjured out of dirt and a rib, magical talking snakes, the oceans as the entire universe, and a man wrestling an angel has been declared historically accurate by this research institution. Yep, I'm sure they have not any bias and are a great source of scientifically accurate publications.
Its author, Henry Morris.
Oh great! The founder of that very same manufacturer of nonsense. A site that believes the world's biologists, climatologists, astronomers, etc. are trying to push an ideological narrative. Why does Mark bring him up?
Also holds a PhD, and like Dr. Surtees, is more qualified than any dumbass 23-year-old student working on a degree from one of these diploma mills passing themselves off as institutions of higher learning these days.
This came up a lot. Mark was unaware that this video was posted late in 2008 for quite a while until I let him know. He also likes to compare my education to his creationist friends. I will come back to this part later. Ironically, the Institute for Creation Research is itself a diploma mill university passing itself off as an institution of higher learning these days.
However, we creationists are not the only ones to use human population growth models to argue our points. Naturalists do so too. Let's just look at but one example. Human beings have been living on Earth for over 1 million years. But for a long time, there were not very many of them. The world's population was never higher than 10 million. People died quickly because they didn't have enough food to eat. Now, do you think this article is stupid too? Or do you regard it as being a fairly good representation of science?
Okay. What? Are you really this dumb? Do you really believe that real scientists publishing accurate studies of human population growth are used as evidence for the age of the Earth? An age billions of years older than life itself. Do you really believe that the mere act of a secular scientist discussing a topic vindicates a creationist discussion of a similar topic? You know, astronomers claim that all planets are round.
How come, like, every planet I've ever seen, including Earth, is round?
No. I'm not going that far back. Astronomers claim that all planets are round. Star Wars also depicts planets as round. Therefore, one of them must have a hidden base in which the rebels are plotting the downfall of the Empire.
The fact of the matter is that it makes several assumptions of which it cannot prove. First, how exactly do they know that human beings have been on this planet for over 10 million years? Answer, they don't. That is an assumption.
That's true. They do not go out of their way to prove that humans have existed for millions of years. Because this is not a scientific article. It is a basic, easy to understand article for English learners. I might have given it to some of my students. If you want to find a more detailed description of the story of the evolution of humanity and the development of civilization, you just have to look a little harder. The story of human evolution was not dreamed up by some evil secular society bent on persecuting Christians, bless their little souls. No one went out there with a conclusion of the evolutionary origin of the human race and went looking for evidence to support it. There is a rich history of phylogenetic and paleontological evidence that I could not do justice in a single section of a single YouTube video. It is the result of generations of scientists conducting tests, combing the earth, and reconstructing eons of history piece by piece. The details have changed as we have found more evidence that has helped clear up some of the gray areas, including dozens of specimens of multiple species of humans and other hominids. But nothing has been discovered that contradicts evolution.
That is an assumption. and indeed an assumption that is running into trouble given what we are learning about genetics, that there's more evidence for devolution and evolution.
You do not provide any evidence for this claim, and I think you butchered it a little. But it really does not matter. There is no such thing as devolution. Evolution cannot work in reverse.
See, evolution says we started off tiny and we're getting bigger and better and stronger and smarter.
The only thing it can do is change a population of a species to better survive and propagate in its environment. What makes a species better suited to its environment has nothing to do with what you personally feel is better. Sometimes what gives a species a survival advantage is being the biggest and strongest thing around. Sometimes it's being small, so you do not need much energy and are good at hiding. Sometimes it is being a good pack hunter, and sometimes it's being cute and cuddly.
Secondly, the article states that people did not live as long. Again, how exactly could they know this?
Again, you are asking this question to the wrong people. Why do you not read a different article? I can find this information quite easily.
The article goes on to hint that it might have something to do with their diet, which consisted mostly of berries and hunted and fished animals. And yet there are many who argue that such a diet as they had is better than our own.
Yeah, lots of people say dumb things about what we should and should not eat. The Paleolithic diet is just another fad diet that does not follow the modern medical recommendations for a healthy lifestyle. Even if the Paleolithic diet was a healthier way to eat, it is not the only factor that limited the life expectancy of our earlier ancestors, who did not have the benefits of such things as clean running water, comfortable and safe living quarters, medical technology and vaccinations, consistent access to food, and not being mauled by our potential meals or other large animals. Of all the stupid black and white creationist thinking, this has got to be the blackest and whitest. Everything is better the later in time we go, or evolution is disproven.
The points to be established here, however, are that 1. Everyone has used human population projections to argue one point or another, and 2. What matters is how claims from either side are evaluated. So I go by evidence, not just because some idiotic 23-year-old college student says so. Smiley winking face.
Yeah, and that's transference. Just because someone is discussing the rate of human population growth in an evolutionary context does not mean that they are using human population growth as an argument for the age of the Earth. No real scientist would ever do that because, as I said before, no matter how long humans have existed, it is still a small fraction of the age of the Earth. And that is why I have never seen any real scientist anywhere ever attempt to use human population as the measure of the age of the Earth, and I challenge anyone out there to find a counterexample. Why was that last sentence in quotes? Did someone say that? Because I didn't. So that takes care of his response to my first video, but I had so much fun reading the hilariously stupid things he wrote that I asked him what he thought of the second video. Spoiler alert, it doesn't get much better. However, this video is getting pretty long, so I'm going to split it up into a two-parter. Hopefully I will get my corporeal self to pull himself together. He is such a drama queen, but editing videos as just a disembodied voice is such a pain in the ass. Be back soon, folks.